My name is Tack, and I'm here with Eugene Chausovsky. We'll be talking about the latest developments in relation to the Minsk agreement in Ukraine. So, Eugene, today the foreign ministers of the Normandy countries have come together to hold one of their meetings on the implementation of the Minsk agreement. The most notable thing here is Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, coming out afterwards and saying the implementation of the Minsk agreement, particularly the Ukrainian legislation that needs to be put in place, will have to be postponed into the next year. So what exactly does this mean for the progress in eastern Ukraine and in Kiev?
Right. Well, I think it's a recognition that the Minsk agreement was not going to be implemented fully before the end of the year. That was already clear before this meeting took place because there's so many things that need to happen, before the end of 2015. Not only the complete halt of hostilities on the battlefield, then you have to have the election observers come in. You have to have essentially Ukraine regain control of the border. But in addition to that, there was a lot of political elements which are still in dispute over granting greater autonomy to the separatist regions, getting them to hold elections within Ukrainian law. And we were very clearly far away from that from happening. And that's, I think, what this meeting showed. They just made that official, essentially.
So if we're looking at those political changes that Kiev needs to make and the fact that, Lavrov is now saying it won't happen in time, what exactly is it that is keeping Kiev from actually implementing it? What are there are certain groups in Ukraine that are opposing this. How does that play out internally?
Exactly. This is the difficult thing, is there's different interpretations of what the Minsk agreement even means between the Ukrainians on one hand and the separatists and Russia on the other. So from the separatist side of things, they feel like they need to get greater autonomy, essentially having their own foreign policy, their own defense policy, being somewhat within the, under the context of the Ukrainian state, but having almost complete independence within that. Whereas Ukraine is saying they need to do a lot of things before that can even be considered, essentially. And with recent elections that happened in Ukraine, local polls show that essentially the current government, the ruling coalition, has lost a lot of its popularity. And one of the things that they've faced pressure on the other side of the spectrum is far-right groups like Right Sector, like the Svoboda Party, are thinking that Ukraine has already done too much in terms of recognizing the separatists or even talking to them. So Ukraine is in a very difficult position in order to follow through more on the political aspect of things. And I think that's what Russia has both recognized, that the timetable is just not realistic, and pressured Ukraine to follow through more.
And then what does this mean for the relationship between Europe and Russia? Because after all, these other countries meeting in this Normandy relation, Russia has a very clear objective to get rid of the European sanctions.
Right.
What does this do if they're pushing the deadline back into at some point in 2016, and we have the European deadline of these sanctions, or the deadline to extend them anyway in January? What do we expect the Europeans to do at that point?
It's hard to say with complete certainty right now, but essentially I think this is Russia recognizing that they were not going to get those sanctions lifted as things currently stand right now. In terms of the Minsk implementation, we have seen a sizable reduction in the fighting on the ground, although the past week or so has seen kind of another uptick. So I think essentially what this does is it will force the Europeans to perhaps delay the decision on the sanctions. I think we can say safely that within the next few months or so, we will not see a considerable easing of Russian sanctions from the European side of things. But it also does give more time in order to implement some of the artillery withdrawals that we've already seen on the ground. Perhaps Ukraine can somehow manage to balance between the West and Russia in terms of giving a little bit on the political side, although not as much as Russia is asking for. So essentially, this is kicking the can down the road, giving some more time for some of the contentious issues to be addressed, but it's still going to be very difficult to come to that real understanding between the two sides.
So you mentioned a little the security situation in eastern Ukraine. So over the past few days, we've actually seen an escalation in some of the fighting there. While it's still at one of the all-time low levels, especially in terms of the sustained ceasefire here, we are seeing more incidents, some of the weapons that were not supposed to be present anymore according to the Minsk agreement being used. Just today, we're seeing reports come out from the Ukrainian command that in one of the battles, a significant number of Ukrainian troops were killed and wounded. How do you relate this recent uptick on the battlefield to the fact that the negotiating countries are actually saying, like, well, let's take more time and figure this out and push it down the road a little?
Right. Well, I think it's no secret that the situation on the battlefield is very much relates to the status of political negotiations. And I think that we've seen some difficulties arise in recent weeks that, we're seeing some indications that some controversial constitutional changes that Ukraine was considering, that was a key demand from the separatists in Russia, that looks to be postponed at least past the end of this year. Perhaps that's why the separatists weren't so happy and increased their level of fighting. But we've also seen the Ukrainian side, at least both sides are essentially accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. Perhaps Ukraine got a little skittish and didn't want to see Russian sanctions being eased at this time, so they might have a level of intent to kind of stir things up a little bit too. It's hard to say exactly what caused it, but I think there is some kind of political connections to this increase in fighting.
Thank you very much. Sadly, that's all we've got time for right now. But if you wish to find out more about the Ukrainian crisis, which we'll continue to track here at Stratfor or on other subjects, please visit stratfor.com.